Welcome to Talkback Radio Network, the home of the Iron Microphone, with your hosts, Dr. Lawrence Gelman and Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg.
And good morning, Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg and Dr. Lawrence Gelman with you. I'm on a remote in Chicago, along with Dr. Gelman in South Texas, and you in New York. So we're all over the country this morning. Our focus this morning, first of all, good morning, Dr. Gelman. How are you?
Good morning.
Our focus this morning will be speaking about the Middle East. Later on in our segment, coming up about 22 minutes past the hour, we will be speaking with Dr. Daniel Pipes, who is an expert in the Middle East, and we'll be discussing a lot of the tensions that are going on today, and a lot of the questions coming around that have been fomenting through the various news channels and whatnot are two things. One, an aggressive Iran with a possible nuclear capability, and what that means to countries like Israel or the United States. Will they take some kind of provocative stance against Iran? Or what's going on in Syria is heating up tremendously. So, and I know we've talked about this before, Dr. Gelman, about your view and really the view that we're presenting this morning about our relationship, the United States' relationship with the Middle East, and what you think that this is caused by, and our involvement in it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this morning before we get into it with Dr. Pipes. So I'd like to speak a little bit about that this morning. The Middle East. Are the United States' role in this? Are we helping things out by being there, by giving money to Israel, to Egypt, to Jordan, or have we made things worse?
Well,
Dr. Gelman.
Pretty much everything that we have been taught in our system of public education and history has been a lie, and it goes way back. Our involvement in the Middle East has been a disaster for all the peoples that live there. Essentially, we are the broker that funds all the terrorist activity there. We are the broker that funds all the violence over there. For example, the greatest promoter of terrorism in the world is not Iran, but Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia promotes the most vile form of Islamic fundamentalism. It builds schools throughout the world promoting their intolerant point of view. They have no rights for women in Saudi Arabia. There's not a single synagogue or church in Saudi Arabia, nor are they allowed to be built. Saudi Arabia gives more money to terrorists than any other nation in the world. Where does that money come from? The United States. The United States is the protector of Saudi Arabia. We buy billions of dollars of oil every year from Saudi Arabia unnecessarily. It is a very tiny source of United States oil. We get much more from areas outside the Persian Gulf entirely. And so without Saudi Arabia, without the money that Saudi Arabia gets from the United States, terrorism would decrease and intolerance in the world would decrease. The United States funds Hamas, Hezbollah, and Al-Fatah to the tune of hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. The United States has armed the fundamentalist regime of Egypt with the latest of Abrams tanks, and we give them billions of dollars every year in subsidy. The United States is the greatest threat to the sovereignty of Israel. It is the United States that has forced Israel to cede most of its territory after the '67 war, and is the United States that has promoted the creation of gigantic terrorist camps in Gaza and the West Bank, and now pretty soon Sinai as well. The United States has a long and sordid history in the Middle East. The United States is the reason that Israel almost lost its sovereignty in 1973 in the Yom Kippur War under the Republican administration in the United States of Richard Nixon, Henry Kissinger, that threatened Israel with loss of aid if they were going to do a more defensive posture against the impending attack by Syria and Egypt, which resulted in a loss of 2,500 Israeli soldiers and nearly the loss of the nation. So the United States has been a disaster for Israel, and the United States is continuing to be a disaster for Israel. Do not forget that the reason Iran is in the hands of Arab fundamentalists is because Jimmy Carter kicked out the Shah of Iran and kicked out the democratic government and replaced them purposefully with the Ayatollah Khomeini. For those who forget that the handing over of Iran to the fundamentalists was what the United States did purposefully, the same way that the United States handed Rhodesia and Jimmy Carter to the thug Robert Mugabe, and the disaster that has befallen that nation. I hope I'm not being too subtle here.
I'm sorry, go on.
No, I just didn't want to be too subtle. I hope I made my point.
No, you're not being too subtle. I guess, it is very common and for people to say, well, if you support taking away all the money from Israel and whatnot, then you must not be a supporter of Israel, or you hear these people on the other side saying it's the Zionist state, and all these names.
I get.
Go on.
I understand what you're saying, but the fact of the matter is, the United States is an anti-Semitic country and always has been. Franklin Roosevelt was an anti-Semite. Truman's wife, Bessie Truman, was anti-Semite. Hillary Clinton is an anti-Semite. The administration surrounding Barack Obama is full of anti-Semites. The United States has always been an anti-Semitic nation. The Harvard, Yale, Princeton, those universities, Northwestern University, had a long history of restricting matriculation by Jews. Nothing unusual there. The thing is, of course, it is well known that the State Department has always been pro-Arab and anti-Semitic. No question. Everyone understands that. Franklin Roosevelt refused to help the Jews during the Holocaust years in any way, shape, or form, even to the point of refusing to bomb the crematoriums in Germany and Poland to save the remaining Jews in the last year of the war. And so the United States has long been an anti-Semitic nation, and the only reason it gives money to Israel is because in the United States there is a very strong Jewish lobby. And in order to placate the Jewish lobby, the United States gives a pittance of money to Israel and gives 1,000 times more money to the Arab nations, either in the purchasing of oil or in direct subsidy. We have subsidized every single Arab nation in the world to the tune of many, many billions of dollars, as well as physically sending American troops to save the anti-Semitic Croatians who sided with the Nazis in the war in Yugoslavia, and we saved, of course, the thugs of Kuwait. So the United States has actually, they talk about the United States forces getting involved in Israel. Israel's always refused to accept United States forces, but the Arabs have had Muslim countries saved directly by United States intervention. The United States is pro-Arabist and pro-Muslim, and it it placates the Jewish lobby, which is very feeble-minded in the United States, by the way. The feeble-minded Jewish lobby in the United States that supports to 80% of its population, voting population, Barack Obama, the most anti-Semitic president that the United States has had since Franklin Roosevelt. And so it placates the Jewish lobby with a pittance of money to Israel while giving 1,000 times more every year to the Arab nations that threaten to eliminate Israel. So I go back to my original assertion. The United States needs to be out of the Middle East entirely, allow them to resolve their differences, allow Israel to do whatever it needs to do as a sovereign nation to defend itself, and it is none of our business. And beyond that, our tradition historically is to make things infinitely worse than they were before our involvement, and that goes back all the way to World War I, World War II, and all the other great conflicts the United States has entered into in the last century or so.
Well, some say that you could go back and trace a lot of this problem to World War I, at the end of World War I, when the Ottoman Empire fell and the colonial powers came and divvied up a lot of the Middle East, and the British Empire promised that sliver of land, which is what was then Palestine and Transjordan, to both Jewish authorities and also to Arab ones, and then with the discovery of oil, which incidentally I do a research, 100-year anniversary of discovery of oil in Persia, which happened this week, and so the British government and the colonial powers were not particularly very quick to just let it all go. And
how did the British get into the position in 1918, 1919, 1920 to broker the dismemberment of the Ottoman Empire and hand out to its Arab friends the newly created nations of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Egypt, and even Turkey, among others? What people don't realize in the great ignorant mass that constitutes the United States system of education is that the nations of Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Egypt, Turkey, Iraq were all part of the Ottoman Empire. Right. They were not independent states. They only became independent states in 1920 to 1922 because of the British and the French, and they did so not because of justice, but whatever served French and British interests. And they took away those lands from, interestingly enough, ironically enough, the Muslim Turks, and handed them over to the Muslim Arabs, except for, of course, for Lebanon, where you had a significant contingent of Maronite Christians. And so so that was, of course, led to every disaster that we have today. But the British have been responsible for much of the calamity of the world since the beginning of the British Empire. But how did Britain get in the position and France get in the position of being able to broker that type of dismemberment of not only the Middle East, by the way, but Europe, in which the countries of Yugoslavia, Poland, and Czechoslovakia were created out of thin air once again by the British and the French? And that was because the United States entered World War I on the side of the British, for who knows what reason, and a war that had been a stalemate between the French and the British on one side and the Ottoman Turks and the Germans on the other side, and Austrians as well. The United States entered the war on one side, and instead of having a stalemate, which would have resulted in a rational peace agreement between all nations, instead it ended up as a one-sided victory for the British and the French, who of course are anti-Semitic nations as well. And what they did is allow the British and the French to create the Versailles Treaty, which vindictively applied rules and regulations to Germany and the Ottoman Empire, which resulted in those countries having an environment that allowed the rise of the fascists in the form of the Nazis and Hitler, and in the resulting chaos that in the Middle East.
Well, it's
United
interesting.
States
Most
was
people don't
responsible.
realize that there was a connection between the Grand Mufti of Palestine at the time in World War II and Adolf Hitler. They were somewhat chummy.
The Grand Mufti, who's I think the father-in-law of Yasser Arafat, was a Nazi. Was a Nazi. He actually, after the Nazis lost the war, he lived the rest of his life in Berlin. After he went to Croatia to to create a Croatian brigade of Croats whose only purpose was to kill the Jews of Hungary and the Slavic regions. The Arabs were pro-Nazi during the war. During World War II, nothing new there. But then again, the British were pro-Nazi in their treatment of the Jews in the Middle East as well. So it is the incredible ignorance of the American populace. It's not really their fault, because they are indoctrinated by the system of public education and by the media, which is nothing more than the propaganda arm of the government, to spew out this bilge of government propaganda and conceal the truth from the American people. So our involvement in the Middle East has been, as I stated before, a complete disaster. It has resulted in the deaths of many thousands of individuals, just as the United States' involvement in much of the rest of the world has resulted in the deaths of many, many millions and subjugation of many millions of other individuals. Let us not forget that the United States, the United States handed over all of Eastern Europe to Stalin and handed over all of China to Mao. Let us not forget that. So we freed the nation of France, and we subjugated hundreds of millions of people to Stalin and Mao. I think that was a poor trade-off. In fact, I think we've been better off if France had fallen to the Germans.
Well, when we come back, we will be speaking.
Are we going somewhere?
We're going. Well, actually, since I'm in Chicago, I think I'm going to go for one of those really great hot dogs.
Omelets at Francis Restaurant?
Yeah, your family owns a restaurant there. That's where I should be going.
That's where you should be going. You should be going to Francis Restaurant in Chicago, the best restaurant in Chicago.
That's a free plug. We'll talk more about that, and we'll
Hey, it's not free. It's not free.
We'll be talking with Dr. Daniel Pipes when we come back.
You are listening to the Talkback Radio Network. We hope you're being enriched by our program today. You may be listening via our archives or to our live broadcast. Dr. Gelman and Rabbi Rosenberg broadcast live on Thursdays from 11 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern, 10 to 11 a.m. Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. You may call the show live during those times, toll free at 888-930-1787, 888-930-1787, or you can find us in the archives 24/7 at ironmicrophone.com.
If you're a veteran of Iraq or Afghanistan, like me, coming home can be harder than expected. But it turns out I wasn't alone. At IAVA.org, there's a free online community of thousands of vets who've got your back. Whether it's managing the transition home or everyday stuff like finding a nice sweater for my dog.
Sweater?
Okay, maybe not that. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America is there for you. Join our community at IAVA.org.
We've got your back.
Brought to you by IAVA and the Ad Council. Dr. Lawrence Gelman is a South Texas-based physician and hospital administrator. His mission is to empower Americans with knowledge that will help change the direction of our country. Dr. Gelman has produced a series of DVDs with the facts on myriad political, social, and economic issues. At this time, he is so passionate about our country and the state of our government that he's declared a moratorium on any costs associated with his DVDs. He'll even pay the postage. Visit ironmicrophone.com and click on the store link. Choose from many outstanding DVDs, including The Hoax, Global Warming, A Convenient Lie, Holocaust, Pro-Choice, The Myth of Roe vs. Wade, and more. Visit ironmicrophone.com. Arm yourself with information that will change minds as well as the future of our country. Order the DVDs now while they're free. Do it quickly because this offer is subject to change in 90 days. Visit ironmicrophone.com and click on the store tab to order your free DVD today.
Welcome back to the home of the Iron Microphone with your hosts, Dr. Lawrence Gelman and Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg.
Back with you, Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg and Dr. Lawrence Gelman. This morning, we are very happy to have Dr. Daniel Pipes with us. And Dr. Pipe is founded in 1990 the Middle East Forum and promotes American interests in the Middle East. In addition to briefing U.S. government officials, testifying before Congress, and conducting studies for executive branch agencies. And he is a distinguished fellow. He's a Tao Distinguished Visiting Fellow at the Hoover Institution of Stanford University. And Daniel is just back from the Middle East and is here to give his current assessment on what we have been talking about in the Middle East and how much of a powder keg is it? Is Syria, Egypt, what is the next really bad piece? And what does it mean for Israel, especially with a now a possibly nuclear Iran? Dr. Pipes is here to answer all of these questions. Good morning, Daniel. Welcome to our program.
Good morning. Thank you.
So where do we start?
Well, Syria is the place to start, I think.
So when we talk about Syria, there was just, we've just been reading about journalists being killed, and there has been uprising again. If you were, let me ask you this: if you were the regime, the Ba'athist regime in Syria right now, of Bashar Assad, and you were watching all this, would you be scared about maybe you're next in line of what happened to Mubarak?
Oh, it's much worse than what happened to Mubarak. Mubarak was the victim of a coup d'etat by his fellow generals. This is more like what happened in Libya. It's a real revolution. And there are reports that suggest that Bashar al-Assad has sent his children out of the country. And I think that makes sense. I would be preparing my plane out of the country, too. This is
I bet you would, yes.
Yeah,
right, but I think the issue here is they can do what they want to do. It's their country. I think the issue here is the United States position in relation to what's going on in Syria. That's what I'm a little more interested in.
Well, there are two different ways of looking at this, which are quite different. There's the humanitarian way to look at the interests of the Syrian people and the deaths and try and bring that to a close. And then there's the strategic way, which is to look at the interests of the United States. And those two are not exactly aligned, because from a humanitarian point of view, what's taking place in Syria right now is obviously quite awful. Not only the death and the injuries.
Let's stick with that for a moment. Is it worse than what's going on in North Korea or Zimbabwe or in Burma or in China or in many other parts of the world? Is the humanitarian so-called crisis in Syria even at anywhere near the level approaching what's going on, let's say, in North Korea?
I don't think that's a useful comparison. We
I
have
think
a
it is.
Situation in Syria.
Well, because it's new? Because it's new, because the situation in North Korea has been going on for 50 or 60 years. So it's not dynamic because it's been chronic versus Syria, which is new. Is that why it doesn't? How is the humanitarian situation different in Syria than in North Korea?
That it's unstable and there's an opportunity for change, and that the regime is weak. And so we can focus on humanitarian concerns, or we can focus on U.S. policy interests, and they're not the same. If one's interested on the humanitarian level, one does one's best to end the fighting and doesn't pay much attention to what follows. If one is looking at it from the point of view of U.S. interests, one looks at the regime, at the impact of, say, the Russian and Chinese support for it, the impact that the fall of the regime might have on the Iranian regime, and one looks at it quite differently. I think we should be looking at it from a strategic foreign policy point of view, not a humanitarian point of view, particularly as Syrians are not known to be, friends of the United States. It's a long history of hostility. So,
right.
So then view,
what? Yeah.
From this point of view, what's taking place in Syria right now is something of an opportunity for the United States. because
in what way?
An opportunity. What do you think the opportunity is? Do you think the opportunity is for us to go in and foment regime change, or what would you suggest that?
No, I don't think we should go in. I think what's happening now is really quite to our interest. In contrast to Tunisia and Egypt, which were against our interests, what's taking place in Syria is in our interests, in that this is weakening an enemy of the United States and Israel. It's weakening the Iranians, who are the paramount enemy of the United States in the region. So I would tend to just leave be and let events take their course. I don't think that we want to intervene. I don't think we want to help Bashar al-Assad. I don't think we particularly want to help his opposition. I'm inclined to do as we are doing now, which is pretty much hands off.
And
I'm not sure if it's I'm not sure if it's hands off. I understand we are arming the so-called rebels, but let's move on from Syria. Let's look at Iran. Let's look at that situation. That's also big in the news today. What are your thoughts on that conflict between the United States and Iran and Israel?
Well, before getting to that, if we are arming the Syrian opposition, that's news to me. I'm not aware of it. As for Iran, well, that is the big issue. The Iranian regime is simultaneously the most aggressive, most dangerous, and also the most vulnerable, other than the Syrian one. And that there's a vast majority of Iranians who don't like the regime, don't like the ideology it espouses, and want something else. So we have both a great danger in the short term and a great opportunity in the longer term. And the great challenge to U.S. policy is how to take care of the short-term dangers and reap the long-term rewards. The fundamental question facing us, as well as the Israelis now, is are we ready to use force to prevent the mullahs in Tehran from getting nuclear bombs? And my view, in short, is that I'd rather use force to stop it than to allow it. Cognizant of the fact that using force would bring about many dangerous consequences, I still think that I would rather face those than facing Iran with nuclear weapons.
So do you think, I guess the current thinking is with the Obama administration that they don't have the gumption or the wherewithal to actually mount a preemptive strike. The conventional wisdom that I've read, anyway, suggests that they may let Israel do that. I mean, what do you think what do you think the United States would do, Daniel, if they knew that Israel was going to launch a preemptive strike? Do you think the United States would stand in the way, or do you think they would let them go ahead with it?
Well, let me start by saying that I think that we all don't really know what we think we know. That I believe there's a great deal of disinformation out there, and that when, say, the Secretary of Defense makes a statement, or the Israeli Prime Minister, that might well be more for Iranian consumption than for our own, and it might well not be accurate. So I believe we'll only know what's taking place now, years hence, and I think we're operating in a fog.
Right. How you said the use of force, you prefer the use of force against Iran. Exactly how would that manifest?
Well, just to finish on the prior question, I don't believe there's any reason to think the Obama administration will not use force. I think it's a completely open question. I think we on the outside don't know enough to judge whether it will or not. Use of force
but define,
could be...
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Define the use of force.
Well, it could be conventional. It could be aircraft carrying...
Well, I don't mean that. I'm talking about the long-term goal. What would be... I mean, in Iraq, we're sitting there in Iraq in that disaster and quagmire. What would be... Whatever mechanism we use to go into Iran, what would be the purpose of it? Would American troops be stationed there? Would they be there for years and years and years? I mean, what would we throw out the regime and put in a phony Democrat regime like we did in Iraq? I mean, what exactly would be the goal there? Just taking out the nuclear weapons and leaving, or what?
Just a small correction. We're not in Iraq anymore. There are no U.S. active forces there. since a couple of months. But in
but the
Iran,
quagmire, the disaster is still there. The disaster is still there.
I don't particularly see it as a disaster, but that's a different subject. It's certainly better off than it was under Saddam Hussein.
I disagree with that entirely, but can you stick with Iran? Because they're certainly not better off there in Iraq. And if you think they are, talk to the Christians that have been exiled from that country if they think they're better off now than they were under Saddam Hussein. Well, let's go back to Iran.
You're dropping the little comments, so I'm having to reply to them. Yes, the Christians are worse off, but the great majority of the country is better off.
There's no evidence of that. Let's go back to Iran.
About Iran, I would say that I would encourage a strike on the nuclear infrastructure as opposed to a regime change. I would not like to see American-led troops moving into Tehran, removing the government, and so forth. I think we should limit ourselves to striking the nuclear infrastructure and not more.
What would happen if the United States just took a hands-off policy? Dr. Pipes just said, "Okay, we're not getting involved. This is Middle Eastern. This is a Middle Eastern problem. We are going back and dealing with our own economic issues. You folks in the Middle East, you figure it out yourself." What would happen in your mind if we took that hands-off approach?
Well, I would make it slightly less hands-off approach. I would make it, and I find this somewhat appealing. Look, Middle Easterners, you've got a problem. If you need our help, come and ask us for it, as opposed to the way we tend to do business, including now, which is to take the lead. I have sympathy with the idea that this is more a local problem than our problem, and that we should get the Saudis, get the neighbors to ask us to help with this problem of Iranian nuclear buildup. The Israelis, of course, and not just on our own move in and take care of the problem. I think we since World War II, the U.S. has been too forward, whether it be NATO or Vietnam or Iraq. We tend to take the lead, and then others get irritated with us. I think we should, as you suggest, stand back a bit, allow others to have to ask us, or to urge us to take care of the problem, and then we're in a politically much stronger situation.
And if we take a hands-off approach, what is your long-term vision with respect to what will happen with Iraq? If we have a nuclear Iran, there's two questions. One, if we have a nuclear Iran, what will the Saudis' response be? There are some in the Middle Eastern who watch such things who have posited that if Iran becomes nuclear, the Saudis will follow suit, and you'll have other moderate unquote Arab countries trying to do the same. And what do you think a nuclear Middle East is going to look like? And will that be a stable force in the Middle East, or a destabilizing force?
I think a nuclear Iran under the mullahs would be a game changer. I think it would be enormously destabilizing. I think the Iranians would threaten to use arms. Or to use nuclear arms. I think they might well do so. I see no advantages to anyone in this. It would be a disaster, and therefore that's why I conclude that it's a good idea for the Israelis or the Americans to use force, assuming economic sanctions won't work, which is my assumption. I think the Iranian leadership will pay whatever price is necessary in terms of starvation and other deprivations in order to build the nuclear weapons. And so therefore I see economic sanctions as a useful step, but not a sufficient step.
Who's going to invite the United States to enter into the fray at that level? Which country?
Well, I think there would be a number of countries that are worried enough that they would ask the U.S. government to do this, but they don't feel they need to because we do it on our own. And in particular, the Saudis would.
So there's long term and short term here. I think it looks like we will be disengaging in certain aspects of the Middle East. We pulled out of Iraq. We are set to pull out of Afghanistan at some point. And with respect to the Middle East, especially with Syria. I do think that we shouldn't take this opportunity to try to do regime change. Even in Iran, where it seems like there's not a great love for the Ayatollah or for Ahmadinejad among the younger people in Iran, and you don't think we should be we should take our hands off first yet, or we should be taking advantage of that and trying to do whatever we can, or maybe Israel's already doing it with Mossad, who knows, with respect to the government there.
I would like to make life as difficult as possible for the government, but I do not want to see American troops going in and overthrowing the regime. I think that would be a mistake. I think that would embroil us in something larger than we're ready to deal with. I think you would delegitimize the succeeding government. No, we can't do everything. We can stop the nuclear weapons. We can't fix the problems of Iran.
Daniel Pipes, thank you so much for being our guest. We appreciate you coming on, and we'd like to hear from you again. Probably we'll check in with you in a few weeks to see how things are going, and we thank you so much for your viewpoint. We will continue in a moment right here on Talkback. Our call-in number 888-930-1787. You're listening to the Talkback Radio Network, home of the Iron Microphone.
You are listening to the Talkback Radio Network. We hope you're being enriched by our program today. You may be listening via our archives or to our live broadcast. Dr. Gelman and Rabbi Rosenberg broadcast live on Thursdays from 11 a.m. to 12 noon Eastern, 10 to 11 a.m. Central, and 8 to 9 a.m. Pacific. You may call the show live during those times, toll-free at 888-930-1787, 888-930-1787, or you can find us in the archives 24/7 at ironmicrophone.com.
The odds of this fastballing philanthropist winning the World Series 3 times? 1 in 3 million. The odds of this man having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. Hi, I'm Kurt Schilling. Learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org. Brought to you by Autism Speaks and the Ad Council. Major League Baseball trademarks used with permission.
Dr. Lawrence Gelman is a South Texas-based physician and hospital administrator. His mission is to empower Americans with knowledge that will help change the direction of our country. Dr. Gelman has produced a series of DVDs with the facts on myriad political, social, and economic issues. At this time, he is so passionate about our country and the state of our government that he's declared a moratorium on any costs associated with his DVDs. He'll even pay the postage. Visit ironmicrophone.com and click on the store link. Choose from many outstanding DVDs, including The Hoax, Global Warming, A Convenient Lie, Holocaust, Pro-Choice, The Myth of Roe vs. Wade, and more. Visit ironmicrophone.com. Arm yourself with information that will change minds as well as the future of our country. Order the DVDs now while they're free. Do it quickly because this offer is subject to change in 90 days. Visit ironmicrophone.com and click on the Store tab to order your free DVD today.
Now, back to Talkback Radio with your hosts, Dr. Lawrence Gelman and Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg.
Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg and Dr. Lawrence Gelman with you. We were talking with Dr. Pipes, Dr. Daniel Pipes, who's a pretty, by all aspects, of all people who know about him, a very, very well received expert on the Middle East, some interesting views. We'd like to hear your views as well about the Middle East. 888-930-1787, 888-930-1787. I'm in Chicago today. Dr. Gelman is at our South Texas studio, and you in New York. So, Dr. Gelman, you agree or disagree with Daniel Pipes? What do you think he was saying, and compared to what you think we should be doing?
Well, in general, I disagree with most of what he said, except for taking out the nuclear weapons parts. I think that's okay, and staying out of Iran as far as boots on the ground. But in Iraq was a secular regime. It is now a fundamentalist Islamic regime. 500,000 Christians lived safely under Saddam Hussein. The Christians lived in Iraq hundreds of years before the birth of Muhammad. Now there are 150,000 Christians left in Iraq. Interestingly enough, many of them emigrated to Syria for safety. There is, in most every Middle Eastern country, to be a Christian is a death sentence. In Afghanistan, where if you're a Christian, you can be killed for being a Christian. If you marry a Christian, you both will be killed, even if the one is a Muslim. And if you promote Christian philosophy, you can be killed. On the other hand, if you accidentally burn a Quran in Afghanistan, as has so recently happened, American soldiers have been killed because of that. Riots have come up. And so in a nation that the United States ostensibly controls, which is Afghanistan, we have a situation where the people of Afghanistan, which will kill you if you're a Christian or a Jew, and will kill if you insult Islam, is a nation that the United States has, where the United States has control. The United States had control over Iraq, and look what has happened there. In Egypt, Coptic Christians are killed routinely and harassed routinely, though the Coptic Christians had been there for hundreds of years before the birth of Muhammad. And so in the Middle East, you can be killed simply because you're a Christian. And that has worsened since the United States intervention. The United States was in control of Iraq while all those Christians were killed and exiled. The United States is in control of Afghanistan today, where if you're a Christian, you are stoned to death or exiled or hung or something like that. So that is what the United States is. Now, let's go to Iran. Let us just say this. Is the government of Iran crazy? Yes. More crazy than the nuclear country of Pakistan? More crazy than the leadership of the nuclear country North Korea? I don't think so. If it's in the United States' interest to prevent Iran from becoming nuclear, all right, then the United States ought to act. Will they act? I don't know. I don't disagree that we should take those facilities out. I don't know what the repercussions of that would be. One doesn't know what the population, which it is true, much of the population is opposed to the theocracy that exists in that nation today, as evidenced by what was going on during their Green Revolution a year and a half or so ago. But you must remember that not only did the United States not do anything to help those individuals seeking freedom in Iran, it actually helped the Iranians subdue them. And so if the United States gets involved, it's certainly not going to be to aid democracy or aid the creation of a pluralistic society. We have no interest in doing that. We don't have the moral standing to do that. But if it means taking out their nuclear weaponry because it is a threat to United States interest, then I guess there's rationale for that. But is it true that a nuclear Iran is a threat to the United States interests? I'm not sure if that has been, I guess there's really no way of proving that, because the only way to know is allow them to become a nuclear nation and see what happens, and then I guess it becomes too late, I suppose, though I'm not in agreement with that. You can take out a nuclear Iran even after they have a nuclear weapon. I mean, and before they can use that nuclear weapon if you wish to do so. So I'm not sure if that's a point of no return. Technically speaking, I think you can take out a country with such limited nuclear capacity as Iran could have. I think that they could be taken. That nuclear capacity can be taken out even if they do develop a nuclear bomb. Yes. Am I by myself now?
There's a lot of discussion with respect to what happens if Israel decides to take matters into its own hands and something similar to
what would
they
be
did
wrong
in
with that?
Iraq.
What would be wrong with that?
There would be. I don't think
Israel is not
in my mind there would be nothing wrong with that.
Israel will not ask the United States to intervene. That we know for sure. So then, what is to prevent Israel from intervening? And of course, they have a much more direct impact on Israel, a nuclearized Iran, than the impact that a nuclearized Iran has on the United States.
Absolutely. And the other piece of this is that if you remember in the first Gulf War, even when the Scud missiles were hitting Israel, the then the first Bush administration declined to give advanced intelligence to Israel so they could retaliate, and told Israel that they better mind their P's and Q's or bad things will happen.
Right, yeah, we've already made the point that the United States is the greatest enemy of Israel in the world today. But so are you saying that Israel will back off even if it perceives an existential threat upon its existence, that Israel will back off from doing anything at the behest of the United States?
I would say that I would hope that Israel wouldn't. I would hope that Israel would have the.
Let's forget about hoping. We're talking about reality.
The reality is that in the past, Israel has backed off when the United States has told them to, and which is unfortunate. But the reality is that it has. The times that it hasn't, when they've listened to the United States, they nearly lost their country. Go back to the Yom Kippur War, which was just a complete mess. We've talked about that before. I think that Israel, as a sovereign country, needs to do what it's best for its own interests. Israel seems to want to play the chess pieces on the board. The United States wishes to play the chess pieces on the board the way they would like to. But I think Israel needs to stand up and say, this is not safe for us. And if we need to go and take matters into our own hands, the same way that we did in Iraq, Israel didn't ask anyone's permission when they took out the nuclear reactor in the 80s in Iraq. That was their own mission. They told no one. No one knew about it, and perhaps they need to do the same thing again. I don't know, but it seems to me that what we've talked about is that the United States tends, even though they say they're a great friend of Israel, they tend not to be, and they tend to take positions that don't particularly bode well for them. So when Dr. Pice was talking about a nuclear, talking about a preemptive strike against the nuclear weaponry that Iran purportedly is building, would you say that should come, Dr. Gelman, from the United States or from Israel? Should the United States just take a backseat and just look and see what happens? Where do you think the United States' position should be?
Well, if the United States is going to act, it has to act due to its self-interest. If Israel launches a strike for its self-interest, the United States, if it moves in subsequently because the attack by Israel is inadequate, it will show that the United States is doing so not for its own self-interest, but in the interest of Israel, and that's always problematic. Israel, of course, will not ask the United States to enter into that kind of activity, and looking to the Saudi Arabians for the invitation. Saudi Arabia will certainly not do that openly, because right now the Saud regime is a pariah in much of the Arab world, and this will just actually make their situation more tenuous. But of course, in my opinion, the Saud regime should be eliminated immediately. If we're going to attack, the Iran, we ought to. If there's a regime change that needs to happen in Saudi Arabia before Iran. So, I mean, I don't know. I think the Israel needs to act for its own well-being. I think the United States will try to prevent them from doing so. I don't know what's going to happen over there. The bottom line is, wherever the United States go, in general, things get worse. And that's unfortunate, obviously very opposite of what we're taught in school and see through the media. If we do attack Iran, it needs to be solely on their nuclear facilities. No boots on the ground, no attempt to overthrow the government. And I think the real question there then becomes, what will the people of Iran do? Of course, it doesn't take a genius to know there's one of two things they can do: leave the regime or overthrow the regime. Of course, on CNN, that makes me an expert, but I really don't think that there are that many experts around that really know what they're talking about. And so I think that's a real question. And I think we don't know, because I guess what we most would hope is that by destabilizing the nation, it's like what happened to Argentina when in the Falkland situation, and that debacle caused the overthrow of the military government in Argentina back in the 80s. You remember that with the Falkland situation? I think what we're all hoping is that the government of Iran will be perceived by the people who are oppressed, which is the majority, that the government is actually doing things which endangers the very nation itself, and so that the people will rise up and overthrow a by then destabilized government, which will have lost a lot of its legitimacy if the nuclear facilities are attacked. So I do believe that the Iranian people, I think what will happen is, and there'll be a civil war in Iran, that the Iranian people will realize that their sovereignty is being endangered not by a foreign power, but by the actions of their own government, and move to overthrow their government, and is hoped replace it with a secular, non-theologian based regime, which will take them back to their more civilized and ancestral tradition. You remember, as everyone knows, that Iran is not an Arab state. It is a Persian state. It is a different. The people of Iran are different than the people of Iraq or Egypt or Turkey or any of these other nations. It is a Persian nation.
I wanted to go back to one thing you had said before. And by the way, if you'd like to add your comment here, we got a few minutes left. 1-888-930-1787. 1-888-930-1787 is our talk line number, our talkback number. And what do you think we should be doing? Do you think that we should go into Iran and just get it over with and take out the nuclear weapons, let Israel do it? I'd like to hear what you think. We have a few minutes left to talk about that.
I want to finish up this program. I want to deviate from the Middle East. I think I've said my say.
Okay.
Because of what's going on in the United States with this mandate for contraception, I want to just add a couple little points there.
Sure. We've got a few minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. The First Amendment's declaration of the right of religious expression does not create that right any more than an astronomer's declaration that the earth is round made it so. That the earth is round is a natural truth irrespective of man's opinion, just as the freedom of religious expression is a natural right irrespective of man's opinion. The First Amendment's right of religious expression is merely a declaration of the nation's founding principle that the right of religious freedom is not granted by government, but guaranteed by government. And if the government should deny that right, the right does not disappear. Rather, what disappears is the legitimacy of government. And I want to make another statement. This idea that's in the media, we are so brainwashed, not me, but everyone else. The United States is so brainwashed. The people are so brainwashed by the idiots in the media, by our corrupt system of public education and our corrupt government. Is that in the media it is now presented that pregnancy is being treated as a disease. Pregnancy is not a disease. The entire contraceptive issue is not a women's health issue. Disease limits life and kills human life as well as other living things. Pregnancy is exactly the opposite of disease. Without pregnancy, then pregnancy is required for human life to persevere. And so what is amazing to me is how we all fall into this trap set by us, by our fascist government and our propagandist media, that makes us believe that somehow contraception is a right because it has something to do with women's health. What absolute nonsense. And this idea being promoted in our society that pregnancy is a disease. You know, let me tell you something. There's this fool there in Georgia, Hank Johnson, who says that we need to keep Guam without getting overpopulated, the island of Guam, because, and you're not going to believe this, but he actually said it, because if there's too many people on Guam, the island will tip over. It is said that we get the government we deserve, and everybody says that we get the crummy government that we deserve. That's not true. I didn't vote for Barack Obama or Bill Clinton, and I don't deserve this kind of government, nor do the 180 million Americans that did not vote for Barack Obama. This is 180 million. 60 million voted for someone other than Barack Obama, and 120 million did not vote. So of the 240 million American adults, 60 million voted for Barack Obama. 25% of the population voted for Barack Obama. The Constitution is supposed to prevent the citizen from being affected by the central government. And why do I, living here in Texas, why am I affected? Why do we have a government that allows Hank Johnson, who thinks that the island of Guam will tip over if they have too many people? Why a fool like that has a say as to how I live my life? Why a fascist and an anti-constitutionalist like Barack Obama, who got 25% of the potential vote, determines the way my life and my career is managed? That is not the way it is supposed to be. We do not have the government we deserve. We have an autocratic dictatorship, a fascist government. It doesn't matter if it's George Bush or Barack Obama, and people are being indoctrinated in our system of public education and through the media, which is nothing but the propaganda arm of the government, that this fascist regime that we call government, that sends our young men and women off to war in order to benefit government and to enslave the American people, that somehow we need government and that government is benevolent, when actually government is malevolent and needs to go away.
On that note, we need to say goodbye.
I hope I'm not being too subtle.
Next week, same time. We'll see you then. Until then, Rabbi Stephen Rosenberg, Dr. Lawrence Gelman, the Talkback Radio Network, home of the Iron Microphone. Until then, you take care.